Stoli is not just sold over the kitchen table, not just in $5 or $10 million amounts. It's been sold in up to $100 million amounts, and not just to unsophisticated individuals. There is no one form of Stoli. It's constantly changing to avoid an insurer's radar and finding it, and to sidestep state insurable interest law. I think it's important for us to back up and ask, why do we have insurable interest laws, and does insurable interest go beyond just law? Insurable interest, in my opinion, must be present twice. Once to meet the public policy, and also to meet the interest of the insurer. The public policy, of course, is to prevent gambling on human lives and to safeguard those same lives. And that requires that when a third party buys a policy, if there is no blood, if there is no legal relationship, there must be some kind of nexus, some kind of reasonable expectation of financial gain from the, and here's the operative word, continuation of the insured's life. But there's also a second form of insurable interest that's important, and that is the insurer is looking for an insurable interest. And that is the coverage must bear a reasonable relationship to the insured's financial status. The insurer has a vested interest in that coverage bearing a reasonable relationship to the financial status of the insured. In other words, the insurer uses what's called financial underwriting so that it will not issue coverage in amounts that are grossly disproportionate to the financial impact that's likely to be triggered by the insured's debt. What neither the state nor the insurer want is a situation where the owner is speculating on how soon the insured will die. What neither the state nor the insurer want is gambling on an insured's life, creating a risk that didn't exist before for no reason other than speculation. If no insurable interest exists, the policy in some states is automatically void from inception, void ab initio, while in other states it's voidable. Legally, no contract ever exists if a policy is void ab initio.
Certainly things that you want to look out for in your business. One, simple, make sure you've got a rep on the actual application or on a document that forms part of the application, part of the contract that relates to financial net worth. Oftentimes those materials are submitted separately by the agent or by someone else, and on the first trial app, which may in fact then become the formal app, there's no information on the application. And obviously most policies require that it be on the application. That sounds simple, but it's something that we need to audit, and we need to make sure that we're being consistent about doing. The second sort of lesson learned is make sure that as much as possible with respect to financial issues that your company has a bright line rule. A lot of jurisdictions talk about having a bright line rule when it comes to underwriting. Obviously, in the area of financial underwriting, there is some room for movement. There's some room for variation. You could qualify for a policy between this amount and this amount, but you at least want to have some standards. The Swiss Re calculator obviously is available, and other means of having a standard underwriting practice with respect to what you will issue. That is always helpful for that to be uniform across the company when the attack comes that, well, you did it this way in this situation, this way in that situation, which must mean it's not material to you if there was a difference in the way that you handled it and there was a difference in the way that different underwriters handled it. Another issue is discrepancies in financial. Obviously, that happens from time to time. There's a discrepancy in the underwriting file. The inspection report may say one thing. The application may say another. You may have it in other areas. If there is a discrepancy, we should be making sure that our underwriting process addresses that discrepancy and doesn't ignore it, again, because this shows that the financial issues were material to us. The best way to handle this, I believe, is using an amendment to the application that is signed with respect to the financial information. If you've got sort of wildly different financial information, you want to make sure that you've got a final number and that's signed off on by the applicant. A related issue here that is sort of wrapped up in this is the other insurance issue that we see a lot of times come up where, obviously in these Stoli programs you have people that will be applying for multiple insurance policies at the same time. and that's ends up usually being a very big deal because they'll get an enormous amount of coverage. And if the insurance company had been aware of really any other coverage except for theirs, they would not have issued. And either, the company did not get an MIB hit on other applications, or for whatever reason they were not aware of it. The issues there for our underwriters need to focus on: one, there's a question on the app, are we following up on it? If they say applying to so-and-so or, comparing for best rates, are we following up on that information in underwriting as opposed to just assuming that we're going to be the only policy that's issued? The ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card on this that we really ought to insist from an underwriting perspective that we use is a total line amendment. It's just easy to do, and if you've done it at the end of the process and you know that this applicant is up, close to the maximum that you're going to write, if you use a total line amendment, it is, in most cases, as I said, it is an absolute winner for you if you're going to contest that specific misrepresentation. Let me talk at this point about a couple of things. One, sort of shift to other lessons learned in spotting stranger on life insurance. Again, none of this is profound, and most of you may know a lot of these things, but I'm going to run through some of them. The list is by no means exhaustive, and we're always glad to talk with folks specifically because obviously individual companies are very different in the way that they do business. And about how that you want to go about doing your due diligence to make sure, number one, as we said, it's not getting on your books, and if it is on your books, what you can do about it. Again, this is not profound, but the use of a trust is not sinister by any means, but there are certainly states that are red flags. Florida, more and more Texas because of the belief by some that the effects of the Texas insurable interest laws. Georgia, Minnesota, Delaware, all of those are red flag states that you at least want to have your underwriters raise an eyebrow to, and especially if you have a trust that shows up over and over again for the same broker with no real connection or between the individual insureds or applicants. Obviously, premium payments from some sources, some of the sources that show up repeatedly in some of these transactions that you want to look at. Again, there may be nothing sinister to it, but it certainly is something that you should give a closer look to. Premium payments from Wells Fargo, from LaSalle, from Wachovia, Christiana Bank and Trust. Again, may be perfectly legitimate, but certainly would not be a bad idea to have heightened underwriting in that circumstances. Obviously, when you have 2 years of premiums that are paid within the first couple of months of the policy, that can be a huge red flag, which is often the case. They go ahead and make a second premium payment and get the policy paid for 2 years. Another huge red flag. One question you want to ask is, do you have a current system for monitoring or registering early inquiries from known sort of life settlement players and people in the industry? Again, there may be nothing wrong with this, but it's certainly something that you want to track. There are a lot of names out there, again, legitimate companies, but nonetheless, you may want to at least be aware of that, and it can indicate that you may want to do some further due diligence. There are a lot of them. Coventry, Maple Life, Peachtree, all sorts of these providers that you want to get a list and at least have your underwriting folks be aware of. Brokers, there are, of course, brokers who are more in this business than others, and that is very specific brokers and as general agents as well that are sort of known to be in this area. I'm not going to talk about any specifically for obvious reasons on the phone at this point, but there are brokers that, if they're involved, is certainly a reason to at least look a little more carefully. The issue, age, and faith is obviously one way to try and look at the tranches of business that you have, and if you've had an uptick in that business in the last 4 years of over the age of 68, 69, 70 in large face amounts, you may not think that you have a STOLI problem, but in our experience, you do if you have an uptick in policies that fall within that category.